to the budget?
Well, unfortunately, right now, there's not a whole lot of solutions for two reasons. Number one, we just don't have the kind of dollars that we have. And number two, to find those increased expenditures or to make those expenditures, we're going to need a 2/3 vote. And right now, we don't have those 2/3 votes. So, my solution right now in terms of dealing with the budget is that we're going to have to force the hands of the Republican. One of their argument that they're going to make is that we're not willing to give the votes to raise any revenue. And what we end up doing, we Democrats end up doing, is that, okay, if you're not willing to do that, then let me then give you the votes to then cut the budget. I don't think that that's the solution. So my alternative is that we have got to stand firm that we're not going to pass a budget of cuts, and we're going to stand firm to find ways to raise revenue. So if, in fact, you're not willing to raise revenues and we're not going to make these cuts, then if there is, in fact, a stalemate, then let's get into a room, lock the door, and let's work this thing out. The problem, however, is that time and time again, we're trying to be the adult in the room, and we're saying, well, if you're not willing to do that, then okay, then we'll go ahead and do that. That's like me going into a room with my kids and saying, well, Dad, I'm not going to do my homework, and then I basically say, well, okay, I guess so, and then we kind of let them. That's not how life works. Okay? At least that's not how my mom taught me.
Interesting you bring that up. My take on Meg Whitman, first of all, is that she spent over $60 million to tell us that Sacramento has a spending problem. Share that. And it just went out of my head what I was going to say. I recall the showdown that Bill Clinton had with Newt Gingrich back in the 90s. And that when Bill Clinton stood his ground and said, okay, shut down the government, and it did, that the country rallied around the Democrat and turned on the Republicans. Is there a possibility of the Democrats having an act of God of saying, no, we're not going to pass a budget, and literally shutting down the government for a time until the public turns on the Republicans?
Right now, that's not the sentiment in the Senate. That may be the sentiment in the Assembly. And again, my encouragement to all of you is that you just got to get letters to both the Assembly and the Senate representatives in this area. That I think that is something that we've got to do. If we don't stand our ground, there's going to be another budget of further cuts, and then for another couple more years, there are going to be further budgets with cuts, and that's going to be just absolutely horrendous.
I just want to statement this is the general fund. Everything goes into the general fund, and then this one sneaks out so much out of it, and this one sneaks out so much out of it. If they have a bill for health care, all that money, so they pass the bill for health care, it goes into the general fund, then it goes into whatever fund the Senate and Congress like. In other words, it comes out of that. The general fund just it isn't like for health care. I think that they ought to have separate things for the health care and all that there, so that they have that to work on, not take it out, not the governor borrowing from the general fund all the time.
Okay.
You don't agree?
No,
Did we get $700 million from the federal government to implement health care in California for the uninsured, that our people can't get insurance until 2014? Is that correct? That we're going to have hundreds of millions of dollars to finance health care implementation in California until 2014 when they have the exchanges?
Well, the way it's supposed to work is that the federal government is going to give us some revenues to help with that particular transition. And again, we've got a number of bills to try to position ourselves a little bit better in terms of waiting for that healthcare reform to come to California. Sir.
What are the biggest sources of revenue for the state, and what are its biggest expenditures? I mean, if you can couple of each.
Well, the biggest revenue for us are personal income tax.
Okay.
And corporate tax, business tax.
Okay.
And that's our biggest winner for us. In terms of for us, The prison is really, creeping up.
Okay.
Education is a big cost for us,
Okay.
and that's pretty much it.
What about, the state pensions, or, pensions? Is that a big, overall, is that a big proportion of it, or is that really a small amount that everyone's yelling about, but it really isn't much of a factor? This is interesting.
Well, the pension was not a big problem a couple of years ago.
Okay.
Because the revenues that we get to cover the pension costs, they were there. But once the secondary mortgage problem started to kick in and all the derivatives from that particular problem, that's where the shortfall comes in. And so we have an obligation, because those are contractual agreements that we've made with labor that we need to now fulfill. And the problem is that if we are going to fulfill those obligations, then we've got to take whatever limited general fund dollars that we have to then pay for that. And that's why you hear a lot of discussions about, well, can labor pitch in to kind of help? Can they delay, some of those payouts? And so that's the discussion that's going on right now.
Can I sort of re-ask the question that Tom asked earlier? And that's basically, because I'm taking notes and I don't really, maybe I missed the answer to that. But if there weren't a 2/3 problem, and you had enough of a majority that you could get through whatever you had to get through to solve this, am I correct in saying that you would basically restore the vehicle license fee, that you would impose an oil sevens tax, and that you would rejigger Prop 13?
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
I think that's a good start. That's a good start. That's a good start.
This last election mentioned Prop 13, but they had that Prop 13 on the last ballot, and that was for the reassessing of property after an earthquake. If you had improvements, that the property would be reassessed to the market value, and 85% of the people voted yes for Prop 13. Now, Prop 13 is not responsible for the deficit. Every state in the country has a deficit. Prop 13, you have people with $700,000 houses. My son bought a house in Pacifica for $720,000. He's paying $7,000 tax. He had another house in San Mateo, and he bought that before the market crashed for $725,000, and he's paying. His tax actually got reduced, so he's paying like a total of almost $14,000 between two houses. That's not cheap tax. A lot of these states, they're complaining about property taxes so much.